Shalom, everyone. My name is Teresa. I've been to Israel many times, and it's one of my favorite places to be. You get to see the Bible come to life, and the food there is amazing. I want to bring some of those flavors to my own kitchen. I'm not a professional, but I love to cook and bake. Most of all, I love to learn. So, let's explore the flavors of the Holy Land together. In the Bible, God brings the Israelites out of Egypt into the Promised Land, a land flowing with milk and honey that was given to them through God's covenant with their forefathers. But if you're familiar with history, you'll know that for a long time the image of Israel in the public mind was hardly the green and fruitful country of the Bible. Early photos usually show something closer to a desert wasteland. So what happened? Well, in Deuteronomy, God reminds his people of the future that awaits them should they turn away from him and follow false gods once they have settled into their new home. Not only will they be taken into exile, but the fate of their homeland through this covenant will also be a dire one. If you know your Bible, you know what happens. But even in the desolation, God made a promise. I will restore David's fallen shelter. I will repair its broken walls and restore its ruins, and will rebuild it as it used to be. And I will bring my people Israel back from exile. They will rebuild the ruined cities and live in them. They will plant vineyards and drink their wine. They will make gardens and eat their fruit. I will plant Israel in their own land, never again to be uprooted from the land I have given them. And if God makes a promise, you know he'll keep it. And he did. Today, when you visit the Holy Land, the population is growing, and the land has regained its fruitfulness through God's blessing and the hard work of the people who love it. It's God's words coming true. The desert and cities are coming alive. Look at this tiny sesame seed. It's hard to imagine that a seed this small would grow into a flower, a bush, or even a tree sometimes. But ask any farmer or gardener and they'll tell you, with a little work and time and water and fertilizer, anything can happen. But even then, it's still in God's hands. In the Bible, we hear a lot about seeds. We're told in Matthew that faith the size of a mustard seed, which is even smaller than this sesame seed, can move mountains. And in the parable of the sower, we see just what one little seed can do. Today we're going to be talking about the sesame seed. This little sesame seed may not look like a lot, but it can do so much, and it is a powerhouse of flavor. In Israel and surrounding areas, the most common way you might encounter it is in the form of tahini, which is a sesame paste that forms the basis of a lot of Middle Eastern dishes. Tahini has been around for a really long time. After all, it is made from sesame, and the sesame plant has been cultivated for thousands of years. The name is believed to be the Greek spelling of a word that was derived from an Arabic dialect that means to grind. In Israel, you may hear it called tahina. It was originally just a byproduct of the process of making sesame oil, which was the primary oil for cooking and lamp lighting in most of the area, but soon became desirable on its own as well. Its creamy, nutty flavor is a key ingredient in many famous Middle Eastern dishes, like hummus, a dip made with chickpeas, baba ganoush, another dip made with eggplant, and halva, a sesame candy, all of which have made their way into the world and into many a satisfied stomach over the years. Sesame itself isn't really commercially grown in Israel anymore. The early kibbutzim, or communal farmer settlers in the 1960s, tried to do so when they first moved back to the land, but were unable to compete with the low prices of imported sesame from places like Ethiopia, China, and India. That said, the products made in Israel from those seeds can now be found internationally. Before I go any further, I need to explain something. This is tahini, and this is Chinese sesame paste. Tahini is usually made with untoasted or very lightly toasted sesame seeds that have been hulled. This means it's lighter in color, is a little bitter, but it's also creamier because the skins have been removed. Chinese sesame paste, on the other hand, uses the whole seed, and it's deeply toasted to really bring out that rich flavor. So it's a little darker in color and usually thicker. Now, as to whether these two are interchangeable, that's a complicated question. If you don't have Chinese sesame paste, you can use tahini. You're just going to want to add a little bit of sesame oil to make it more fragrant. It's a little harder to do the other way around, so for our recipes today, you're going to want to try to get your hands on some tahini, or you could even make your own. Now that we have our tahini, we're going to make a really simple, really delicious all-purpose sauce called tahina. In a bowl, you're going to whisk together half a cup of your tahini, 2 tablespoons of lemon juice, 2 to 3 pressed garlic cloves, or about 1/3 teaspoon of garlic powder, a pinch of ground cumin. Optionally, you can add a pinch of smoked paprika, and salt and pepper to taste. Keep in mind, we are not going to cook this, so the raw garlic is going to taste like, well, raw garlic. I personally enjoy the spicy flavor of raw garlic, but if you don't, one cookbook recommended crushing your garlic into the lemon juice separately, letting it sit for about 10 minutes, and then removing and discarding the garlic. That way you'd still get a little bit of that garlic flavor without it being too much. Once they are all combined, you're going to slowly add water. In the beginning, it may seize up a little, but keep going. Add just enough water to get your desired consistency. This is when you get to customize it to your personal taste. You can add more lemon juice, more salt, finely chopped herbs such as parsley, mint, and/or dill. If you don't want to whisk by hand, a small blender or food processor would also do the trick. My favorite way to use this sauce is with roasted vegetables or raw vegetables. Preheat your oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit or 200 degrees Celsius. You're going to wash your eggplant and sweet potato, and then peel the sweet potato before slicing both into rounds about 1/2 inch or 1 centimeter thick. Arrange them in a single layer on your baking sheet and brush lightly with oil. I usually season it with a little bit of salt, but this is optional since they're going to have our sauce on top. Roast them for about 30 minutes or until done and slightly browned. These can be served hot or cold, and they make a very nutritious and delicious side dish. I've taken some of our tahina and I've thinned it out a little bit more. Drizzle on some sauce and optionally some smoked paprika and chopped parsley on top for color. And there you go. Isn't that beautiful? Now for a little taste test. I also like to serve it as a dip with raw vegetables. I've kept it thick over here and just blended in some fresh parsley. It's a good thing we made a lot of sauce. After all, there's a lot you can do with this dressing. You can put it on salad, you can drizzle it on your chicken, you can put it on some falafel, or you can mix it with some pasta for a nice summer pasta salad. The possibilities are endless, especially since you can customize it to your own personal taste. Now let's talk about halva. Halva is another popular item that uses tahini. It's a dense yet crumbly and fluffy sesame candy that comes from Persia. The name comes from the Arabic root meaning sweet. Originally grain-based, these were sweetened with dates, honey, and eventually sugar, rising to popularity during the height of the Ottoman Empire. The Ottomans were the ones to introduce sesame to the mix, and we have the Romanian Jews to thank for what we enjoy as halva today: tahini, water, sugar, salt, and flavoring. Don't get too excited. We're not making these today. They take a little bit of time and require a candy thermometer, which I don't have. Besides, I prefer to buy them. They're everywhere in Israel, and you can sometimes even find them online. No, today we are going to make the famous hummus and baba ganoush. To you, hummus might be more famous than baba ganoush, but they're both delicious and they both use tahini. So let's get our ingredients and start cooking. We're going to start with hummus, or hummus. Hummus has been around in the Middle East for a long time, even though its origin is rather unclear. The name comes from the Arabic word for chickpeas, which makes sense as its main ingredient is, you guessed it, chickpeas. It's a protein-rich dip often used with bread, and early versions were associated with peasant food. Again, we probably have the Ottoman Empire to thank for the version we are familiar with today. Hummus itself, though enjoyed by those in the Middle East, didn't become as widespread until the 1990s because it required too much time and effort to make at home and was expensive to purchase in restaurants. But once it became mass-produced and the food processor was more readily available for use in the home, it began to enjoy great popularity, and now you can find it everywhere. To make hummus, you're going to need 1½ cups of chickpeas, also known as garbanzo beans. Most cooks will tell you that starting from dried chickpeas will make it more creamy and authentic. You will need to soak them overnight, so at least 8 hours, and then cook them in water until they're tender, which can take up to 2 hours. I didn't say this would be fast. Now, if you don't have time, a can of garbanzo beans will also work, but the final texture will be slightly different. Overcooking your chickpeas will actually make the final product creamier, so even if your beans are coming from a can, toss them in some boiling water and let them simmer for about 20 minutes. This is an optional step, but I like to take the skins off. They peel off pretty easily. You just give it a little squeeze and they pop right out. This makes for a smoother hummus, but if you miss a few and you leave them in there, that's okay. That's just more fiber. You'll also need the juice of 1 lemon, 1/3 cup of tahini, 1 to 2 cloves of garlic, extra virgin olive oil, and salt to taste. Now stick everything in a blender or food processor and blend until smooth. Adjust to taste. If it's too thick, you can add hot water while the machine is running, or more olive oil. Of course, if you like it thick and chunky, that's fine too. After all, they didn't always have machines. Early versions of hummus were mashed or pounded by hand. Now we're going to transfer this into a serving bowl. Now it's time to make our baba ganoush. Baba ganoush, which is very fun to say, is technically classified as a salad, specifically a mashed eggplant salad that comes from Lebanon. Baba is the Arabic term of endearment for father, and some translations say ganoush comes from the word meaning indulged or pampered. Historians aren't sure if that's referring to the father who is enjoying this dish or if it is referring to the eggplant. Israelis learned the recipe from the Arabs, and it became rather popular post-1948 when eggplant was often seen as a meat substitute. Today, you can pretty much find this dish anywhere, usually right next to the hummus. You will need 1 large eggplant or 2 small ones, extra virgin olive oil, 1½ tablespoons of tahini, 1 garlic clove, 1 tablespoon of lemon juice, 1/4 teaspoon of cumin or sumac, 1/4 teaspoon of cayenne, which is optional, 1 tablespoon of plain unsweetened yogurt or mayonnaise, also optional, it's just to make the final product more creamy. Salt and pepper to taste. You'll need to prepare the eggplant first. Ideally, you'd want to grill these over a fire to get a smoky flavor, but we will make a simple version that is easier for the home cook and still tasty. Preheat your oven to 425 degrees Fahrenheit or 220 degrees Celsius, trim the top of the eggplant and cut it in half. Make a few slits in the skin and cut a crosshatch pattern into the flesh. Sprinkle on some salt and let it sit for about 10 minutes. This will help pull out any bitterness. Wipe off and dab dry. Brush both sides of the eggplant with some oil and put them flesh side down on your pan. Roast for 30 to 40 minutes or until fully soft. Set aside to cool. If you were grilling the eggplant, you'd want to jab it all over with a fork or a knife and then place the whole thing directly onto the grill. If you don't poke holes in it, it will explode on you. I assume you could also do this under a broiler, but I haven't tried that, so just make sure you practice good fire safety if you decide to give that a go. Once it's all cooled, we're going to scrape out the cooked insides and discard the skins. You'll notice everything is rather wet, so we're going to move the insides to a colander and let it drain for about 5 to 10 minutes until most of the liquid drips out. I sometimes help it with the back of a spoon. Now you can either transfer everything to your handy-dandy food processor again, where you will pulse it to avoid overblending, or you can mix it vigorously by hand with a spoon. Adjust to taste. You could eat this right now if you really wanted to, but it's best to cover it and put it in the fridge for just 10 to 15 minutes. Let all the flavors get to know each other, and then it's ready to eat. And now I have them both here. You're gonna put some fresh extra virgin olive oil on both of them. It's traditional to sprinkle on some sumac, a tart red powder made from the berries of the sumac bush, and cumin. In America and Israel, you'll find all kinds of fancy toppings, like chopped artichoke hearts, roasted bell peppers and eggplants, and even more garlic. And then we're going to put a little bit of parsley on both of them. Ta-da! Look what we made! Now it's time for a taste test. I have pita bread that I brought back from Israel, and I'm going to dip it into our baba ganoush and hummus for our taste test. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. That's pretty good. It's very fragrant and it's very creamy. All in all, delicious. Well, that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed watching. I hope you try some of these dishes in your own homes and that you enjoy them. And most of all, I hope all of you get a chance to go to the Holy Land and try the real thing in person yourself. It's definitely worth a visit or two. B'tayavon. Bye.